a British Latino Network production.
Welcome back to another episode of the British Latino Network. Today I have Stefanie with us. Stefanie Alvarez, she's a law graduate and she's kindly agreed to come on and talk to us about her journey, about her experience through university, through the early stages, and now after university, the whole journey into law and from there on. Stefanie, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, like I said, so thank you for coming on, and pretty excited about getting to know more about your journey and what law is, because obviously there are, it's known that it's a quite tough degree to get into and also to get through as well. So we're definitely excited to know more about it. So yeah, Stefanie, just for us to sort of get into it, just a brief introduction on yourself, like what's your background, just so the listeners can sort of know more.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thank you for having me on here. It's a pleasure being able to kind of be a part of our community and give back. So I'm Stefanie. I grew up in the UK in London, but I was actually born from Colombia. Both my parents are Colombia, and I came over here when I was 5. I grew up in North London and went for university went for education. During college, I studied English literature and language, which I really loved. I also studied Spanish as well as psychology, and I had done performing arts as an AS.
Right.
I really, really loved the arts at that time, but I think gradually when I was looking into choosing what to do at university, I kind of looked at the skills more personally as to what I thought I wanted to specialize in. So I knew, for example, through performing arts that I wanted something that involved speaking, as well as being able to, just speak in front of people. So public speaking more than anything else.
Yeah.
English literature and language, I really like the idea of kind of that side of learning a skill that involved maybe a lot of reading and was maybe quite in-depth and very interesting. And psychology, I think, equally kind of looking into human behavior. So I try to juggle all these different things, and of course Spanish. So I kind of ended up with law, and I was quite happy with that because of my personality, like I said, and all these skills that I thought I had. So I undertook my undergraduate degree at the University of Hertfordshire, but actually a week before I started, I changed my course from straight law to law and philosophy.
Right.
I don't regret that. It was what they call a joint honours degree, which means that most of my curriculum at the beginning was 50-50, but during my second and third year, I did mostly focus on the law side of things.
Right.
And there is a stigma, I think, between of law being very tough. It is very tough, if you want it to be. But I think if you take the time, for me, I absolutely enjoyed it. I love the law.
Yeah.
So for me, it was more of a passion to be able to learn about it, the different aspects of it, because you learn criminal law, you learn civil law, human rights law, European law back then, all these different types of law. And as well as that, I was able to participate in a lot of extracurriculum activities, such as mooting, which is kind of like a mini fake trial, if you like, as well as other debating, for example. So loads of different curricular activities that also encapsulated all the skills I really liked as well.
Okay, cool. And was there any sort of obviously you had these interests which eventually manifested in you picking law for university, but was there a specific motivation maybe for you to say, okay, let me pick law specifically at university?
Partly, I think, growing up and being Latinx, I grew up in North London in some area called Finchley, which was predominantly throughout my primary school education quite white, so white British, I would say, and I therefore didn't really see much representation of myself in other people or my pupils or teachers. Now, my link, I guess, also coming to law is the fact that I've always been very passionate about minority rights, especially Latin American rights in the UK. Yeah. And my mum has been a trader at Latin Village in North London, Pueblito Paisa and Seven Sisters. And just kind of seeing how she advocates for the community there, and with all the issues that have happened there, I think I naturally gravitated towards also a career that involved seeking justice and advocating for people and speaking up on behalf of people. That I think also really attracted me to more so, I'd say, become a barrister, because with a barrister you have to go to court, you have to use your voice to advocate on behalf of others, as opposed to a solicitor, which is more the writing side of things and working in a law firm and your first point of contact potentially. Right.
Okay, I see. So once you began your course at university, was there anything that sort of took you by surprise or something? Perhaps, going into university, you had like these preconceptions of what the degree was going to be like, what it would consist of. Was there anything that sort of you found challenging when you first started?
I think mostly it was, I wouldn't say there was anything challenging, just because I didn't have an expectation of what to expect.
Right.
I didn't do it as a lot of people had done law in college or something quite similar, politics potentially. Yeah. I hadn't. I had just done English, and I really just loved English literature and language. So when I started at least my first year, I think was mostly taken aback by the amount of reading I had to do, both for philosophy and both for law. So that's probably one thing I would say. But apart from that, I didn't have any misconceptions. What I did really like was, of course, the rationale behind how law is made and all the different laws. And you hear about all these different cases and funny cases that you kind of just stick with you because of something that's happened in the past that's really shaped the way that our legal system is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Right, so for the many that, obviously they have like a very superficial or understanding of what law is. What is law specifically, as a degree, but also as a profession? What is law?
So I would say if you're studying the law as an undergrad, it's completely different to the specialist course, the vocation course of becoming a barrister and solicitor. It's a lot more hands-on. So during my undergrad, I found what is law, to answer your question, I guess, was the application of different types of principles and how that feeds into our legal system, but also how it can trickle down to politics, everyday life, why we do what we do. And one of the modules I also studied was kind of more from the human rights perspective. So what is right and what is wrong. So there were different types of principles and that therefore formed what we probably would do today. So for example, to make sure that you don't drive your car on the right side of the road, or if you do, like, what does that happen? What does a fine mean? What does a misdemeanor mean? What does a sentence mean? How long is a sentence? What's the different categories of the sentence? And during then my postgraduate degree, so the bar professional training course, it was more the application of that. So we had done all the reading, and they kind of, the way that the institution works is that they assume, of course, that you had done all the academic side of things in your undergrad, and therefore it's more the application. So sometimes I'd have to go to bar school in my full suit and pretend to be in front of a judge, and that was a lot of the advocacy side of things. And ethics, I learned a lot about ethics, how to conduct yourself in the professional world. So what to do if, let's say, a client wants to give you a $500 bottle of champagne. Do you accept it? Is it wrong? Is it right? Yeah. So more the practicality, or if you're faced with another dilemma, if you notice another barrister come drunk to court, what do you do? So it was really interesting. But I would say, generally speaking, the law is practically everything that governs the right and wrong in our society, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, I mean, it definitely, so in the second part of your education, let's say the postgraduate, it was more about learning the practical real life application of your knowledge now, wasn't it? So knowing how to conduct yourself and sort of building on from the knowledge you'd built up in the undergrad, is that sort of how it works?
Yes, exactly. So during the undergrad, that's when you do your academic essays. That's when you can, argue to the nth degree, whatever it is that you want to argue, and also the exams as well. So with the difference mostly in bar school, so some of the things that we had to learn, of course, are client conferencing skills. So how do you talk to a client? How do you talk to a client that's potentially going to jail for the rest of their life? How do you talk to a client who might actually lose their child in a custody dispute, or put their child up for adoption because social services wants to take it away for whatever reason? How do you talk to a client who's going for divorce? All these different types of skills, what do you say? And as well as, of course, actual skills that you would need in courtrooms. So, for example, in trials, you would have to cross-examine the witnesses. What that means is you would have to put questions to a witness in order to entice an answer that's benefit to your client. So that's when you see maybe on TV and movies where someone's in a witness box and you're basically trying to say the person's a liar, and you have to ask questions that it's quite specific, and it's I would say it's kind of an art to be able to learn how to advocate, how to persuade, how to public speak, how to write in front of people, all the type of practicalities in the life of a barrister, or if you did the LPC, then life as a solicitor.
Right. And how have you found the sort of being exposed to those sort of situations where you have to speak in front of people in the court, sort of simulating, I'm guessing, like a case, or actually, participating in one? How have you found that experience?
I absolutely love it. I think just naturally, I've been very fortunate to have an array of different types of clients, and therefore I've represented Latin American clients and been able to utilize, for example, my language skills to help them come across in court properly. So in terms of like the legal jargon, but also I think I've definitely, I've been in front of judges for the past year and 4 or 5 months with the job that I have now. Yeah. So that's every day being in front of different judges at times. And it's helped me kind of really build on my public speaking, persuasiveness, but also kind of other skills that you might notice. So when a judge maybe pushes back because they have had a horrible day, and, they're people as well, and they might be a bit mean or say something, and you kind of still you need to remember, like, you're not there to please the judge, you're there to help and assist your client. Right. So pushing back and things like that. So I get real satisfaction of really being able to help people express themselves and put forward their cases as best as I can. And a lot of them, just even a hug after a hearing for me is just monumental. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And, from looking into law from the outside, especially to me, it doesn't seem like... Now, how does the pathway work? So, for example, is there a specific law degree that you have to take, or is it like you can take, for example, in your case, where you obviously took a mixed sort of law degree? Like, how does it work? Like, do you pick that degree and then you have to do postgraduate training, and then what's like the typical pathway?
So there's, I would say, 2 pathways. The first being the standard or the traditional route, which is you go to you do an undergrad in law, and that qualifies as a law degree, or potentially you do what I did, which was still a joint honours, but ultimately, because I had done all the core modules in law, still qualified as an overall law degree. Right. However, if you did want to do something else, that's absolutely fine. And what a lot of people do is do whatever undergrad they would like. And then they do something called the GDL. So the GDL, you can take it after your undergrad, and what it is, it's a conversion course. So it converts whatever you need, and you essentially it's like an accelerated course in that you learn all the core modules that you would have done in your undergrad in law. Right. However, after that, you still have to either go and do the LPC, which is to become a solicitor, or you do the bar professional training course, the BPTC, in order to become a barrister. So either way, after you finish your degree or your conversion course, you still either way have to go to bar school or do the LPC for solicitors.
Okay, so that's the point where it separates and where you start to pick what you wanna specialize in, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a long route, and I know a lot of people get deterred from the fact that it is such a long route. I mean, I'm still not there in the sense that I'm not a fully qualified barrister, because after you do the solicitor's route, so the LPC or the bar professional training course, you still have to undertake a year's training. So for solicitors, it's called a training contract, but for barristers or potential barristers, you have to undertake a year of pupillage, and that's when you get your full practicing certificate.
Right. Okay. And in total, let's say if you take the traditional route, on average, how long do you think it typically takes someone to, for example, let's say from an undergrad to become a fully registered or qualified barrister? How long do you think it typically takes?
I think it would take 6 to 7 years. So if you look at your undergrad, that could either be 3 years or that could be 4 years if you have a year abroad. Then you have obviously the 1 year that is bar school or the LPC potentially. So that already is 4 or 5 years, depending on your undergrad. And then you need to do either the training scheme or the pupillage. So that's an additional year. Right. So again, you are looking at potentially 5-6 years.
Okay, I mean, it's definitely worth it if you're interested, and it's a great investment in your future and in society as well. Because there's obviously a very important role that lawyers play in society. So yeah, no, I mean, I think even though it's 6 or 7 years, it definitely seems worth it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I don't want to discourage anyone, because I know there's many Latin Americans that maybe feel that they do want to do law and think it's not really for them, not only because it's really long, but it's also can be quite expensive. Right. I mean, I, for example, wish I had known about all these sort of scholarships that were available before I did the bar course. And then also after for example, specifically with the bar course, you have to be a member of an inn, which is kind of the institution that will call you to the bar. It's very traditional. You get called to the bar. Right. And this type of inn will then provide you with financial support if you need it, as well as all other opportunities, for example, to go abroad and maybe work in a law firm in America or somewhere in Asia, practically all over the world. And so although it is long, I think it's definitely worth it. And the skills that I have learnt, I know I wouldn't want it any other way. And it's a very fruitful career.
Okay. And at what point, for example, would you recommend someone looking into like these scholarships, that the one you're talking about, and these extra resources that perhaps go sort of under the radar and like?
So I would definitely say during your university undergrad, enjoy it, have fun, maybe have an idea as to what you want to do. So participate in extracurricular activities if there are any at university. Usually if there is a law faculty, there should be some sort of mooting, there should be some sort of debating, or some other extracurricular activities similar to that. Yeah. Speak to therefore your law tutors and get an idea as to what you kind of feel you want to do, if you want to go for the bar route or the solicitor's route. Once you make up your mind, the summer in between, or after you graduate, I would definitely look into kind of finding out a little bit more about the scholarships and what is offered before you maybe embark on into the postgraduate degree. Because it's important to understand that there are means of paying it off potentially before actually undertaking it and maybe taking out a loan. And there's a lot of different options as to how you can approach it. So like I said, the inns can pay for your bar course, or they can also help you with a loan. There's different bank loans for students as well. And of course, if you are fortunate enough to have your parents to pay for it, or how you can come to that is the fact also these courses are offered part-time. So if you needed to work alongside your studies, there's also that option as well.
Okay, cool. Okay, I get that. All right, so making it a bit more sort of this conversation more personal, like in your case, at what point did you realize that you wanted to go down the barrister as opposed to the LPC, right?
Yeah. So it definitely was during my undergrad. I probably would think it's the second to third year where through mooting, so I had a friend at university, a really good friend of mine, and we did everything together and we signed up to do mooting. So like I said, it's a fake type of mini trial where you're up against, so it'd be a team of two, we're a team of two, and then we'd be up against another team of two, and it's a competition. So each team would be faced, let's say, with a legal dilemma, and then you have to find a way of arguing for or against using the law. You then, let's say, present your argument in front of the judge, and then the judge, which would usually be a law tutor, would then decide who wins, and then goes through the next round and the next round and the next round until you kind of win overall. And I think just through that process, I thought about it, and I really loved the idea of public speaking. I really liked putting forward my argument. I liked debating with someone else. I liked having a competition or opponent. And if they said the sky was blue, I'd definitely say it was yellow. So regardless if I agreed or not, it didn't matter. I love that. Whereas my friend at uni, she was saying, you know what, I don't think this is really for me. And she ended up doing the LPC law route. Whereas for me, I just knew that I would kick myself if I didn't try the bar course, which I know traditionally it's known to be a bit harder and a bit longer and difficult to get than if I did the solicitor's route.
Right, okay. And so, for example, what stage of sort of training are you currently at? So
I've passed the bar and I'm what they call a unregistered barrister.
Right.
However, in order for me to be registered, I'm looking for pupillage, which is 1 year's training, around 1 year to a year and a half training, depending on the chambers. So chambers are set, let's say, like a law firm, but for barristers. It's an office where all barristers work. So that's where I am at the moment. My job requires me to basically have a very similar role to a barrister, in that I go to court, I have solicitors that instruct me on different cases. I basically put forward their case. I sometimes have clients that come with me, and I conduct trials in civil proceedings, and ask questions and cross-examine witnesses, etc. And then the judge makes a decision. So I do a lot of, and a lot of the time as well in those type of hearings, I'm up against barristers.
Right.
So that's where I am at the moment. It's just pupillage, I would say, is quite challenging to get.
Right. Okay.
And the main difference I would probably highlight is that there's less pupillages than there is training contracts. So that's why, let's say, if there's 100 people passing the solicitor's route, there might be still, 80 training contracts available. Whereas for potential barristers, it might just be maybe 20 to 30 pupillages available for that year. Right,
okay. So it's definitely more sort of competitive, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Again, so is there anything someone can do to sort of make that transition a bit easier, or is it just a case of continuously applying and seeing when you get your opportunity? Because, every year, of course, there's going to be sort of, I'm guessing, quite a large number of people passing the course. And so how can someone improve their profile or make themselves more appealing for a chamber to accept them?
Definitely work experience if you can, and an array of work experience. So, for example, if you want to apply to chambers, you need to maybe show that you understand what chambers do. So I've always been very interested in family law. So I've definitely done what they call mini pupillages, which is where you kind of go to a chamber for a week and you carry out work experience with that chamber. Sometimes it means you following one barrister around for the week, or it can be a different barrister every day. And it allows you to kind of get an insight into not only how chambers operate, but also that sort of practice area. So mini pupillages, I think, is definitely a really good opportunity, but also charities and legal organisations or NGOs, anything like that attracts you, then do it if that's what you like. So pro bono work. If you can, let's say, show also what they look for is a lot of intellectual rigor. So if you like writing blogs, if you are quite outspoken on social media, all these different type of practices also help.
Right.
especially now, I think, in terms of the age where everyone's turning a bit more to how the media works. I definitely feel that it's really important to come to the bar kind of as an entrepreneur and show that, you're just a one-trick pony. I do this, I also have this, I do a blog, I've done a podcast, I've helped with charities, etc., etc. I use my platform to advocate for others. Whatever it is that you're passionate about, make sure that you also come across in that. And yeah, I would say that's probably a good starting point.
Cool. Okay. And like in your sort of journey, like has there been anything in particular? Because obviously, you come across as very enthused with the career and very attracted to it. Has there been at some point where you sort of doubted, should I continue with this, or like maybe a particular event or something that you just found really challenging?
Yes, all the time. Well, I can remember one personal experience was, and it was actually really sad. So before I actually started the bar course, I had applied for a job as a paralegal, and it was in this firm. And when I had gone there, I had my interview with the partner of the firm, and he literally just said to me, basically, he looked at my CV and he was like, "Are you sure you want to become a barrister?" I was like, yeah, that's, I really want to do it. And he was like, "Well, you went to University of Hertfordshire, it's not Russell Group, and it's obviously not Oxbridge. What percentage of barristers do you think there are that went to your university?" And I was like, "Oh, I have no idea." He was like, "Well, you should really therefore rethink a career at the bar." So he was like, no, seriously, he was so brutal. And I kind of sat there and I thanked him for his time. I then left the interview and I remember really bawling my eyes out and calling my dad. And then it kind of put things in perspective that, first of all, I wasn't going to give up because I wanted to show him and come back to his office one day and be like, "I told you I'd make it." But also it kind of made me realize that academics in law really still plays a part. So where you go to university, they say it doesn't really matter, but generally speaking, the bar is still quite old school in that the majority of members still went to Oxbridge or very prestigious universities, which at the time, of course, being a first generation migrant, you don't really think it should matter. You just, you're proud to go to university at that point.
You don't even understand it to be a factor.
You just you just kind of go through the process as it comes along to you. So that I've always found that, and especially because it's quite archaic in some of its traditions. So some of the dinners I would have, and there'd be members of the bench, which are judges or some other sort of similar thing, and some of the conversations, and it's a lot of still this, it's very still very old, an old middle-aged white male dominated area and career. So it was quite difficult for me, and I still get that imposter syndrome of the fact that I genuinely know just 2 Latina barristers in the whole of the bar. One of them, she didn't actually qualify here. She's Peruvian, but she came over here, so she didn't actually pass the bar here. And the other one, she's half Argentinian, half Colombian. She's amazing, but she's also, one of the first of few. So there really wasn't anyone still now that I feel that I can kind of go and speak to in the sense of that we come from a different, similar background. However, there are a lot of other organisations that I do get involved with, and mostly from ethnic minorities, that I do now have myself, for example, 2 mentors, and they've been sensational, and they've been with me for the past 2-3 years, and they always tell me to keep going because they face the same challenges, they face the same barriers, they also didn't go to the most prestigious universities, their family also didn't have X amount of money to pay everything. And they made it. So for me, it's always that encouragement. But I would definitely say imposter syndrome, even now when I go to court sometimes and you see most of the barristers there are white men, and you're, this Latina and you're female, and you're like, okay. But yeah.
Definitely. Do you think, because obviously they have this criteria, or, like you said, so they say that it doesn't really matter what university you go to, but obviously it seems that that is still the case. Do you feel like, because obviously you've probably met other people who are at the same stage as you, who've maybe gone to Oxbridge, do you feel like there's a real difference, or is it just the fact of saying, well, yeah, this barrister went to Oxbridge, he was educated or she was educated there, but do you feel like there's any real palpable sort of difference in what's being taught?
I don't. So you'll find some chambers, and there are some chambers out there, for example, that only accept, and I know they probably say they don't, but the majority of, when you look at their members on their website, most of them went to Oxbridge, if not all. Most of them have a first, if not a double first.
Wow. Didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. Most of them, therefore, has this prestigious, let's say, experience abroad. So maybe they did death row in America, or they worked in Shanghai, or, for the UN. So they have some fancy also and something extra from somewhere abroad. So it is like this. So there generally are chambers that they still look at your academics, because the way that the application process works, at least there's a portal, and it's kind of like UCAS. So they understand you have to put all your grades there. You have to put your grades from your GCSEs, your A levels. Some chambers specifically ask for you to give the percentage per course.
Right. Okay.
So I would say, I mean, of course, the difference from someone that went to Oxford and Cambridge and me would be the academic. I don't think in terms of maybe passion or determination or grit or advocacy skills, potentially, I wouldn't say that's what sets us apart, but definitely academics. But for me, sometimes it stems from way before. So a lot of them maybe went to private schools or boarding schools. So that's already where, my education already from the beginning is at a disadvantage, because I just didn't have that level of training at the beginning, where they've probably, when it comes to exams, are a lot better at that than I am, because they've had more experience in it, or maybe had tutors, etc., etc.
Of course, they've pretty much been shaped to pass the course and to get into a high-flying career. I mean, the thing is that's potentially sort of problematic, because if you've got these chambers which are accepting, or predominantly accepting people from Oxbridge, the people who are typically graduated from Oxbridge are within a certain group of people, and so the diversity of barristers that you're getting is going to be really, really filtered down and like diluted, because the people that are coming from Oxbridge aren't going to be the most diverse, just because of how hard it can be to get into those universities. Like the entry requirements typically favor people who are already, well educated, even from secondary school, sixth form.
No, absolutely, and that's a debate. I wouldn't say debate, but definitely conversations that have happened since I've at least looked at a career at the bar, which is obviously, how do we make the bar more diverse? Because if you think about the bar and it representing the general public, how is it then that barristers aren't representative of the general public?
Of course.
It just, you're not going to be able to maybe understand some of the hardships that your clients face, because maybe you haven't had to face those. Not saying that would put you at a disadvantage, but there's also definitely some empathy when you're able to relate to your client on a certain level. So there are conversations, and I think now more so, there's a lot more than anything, I would say, black barristers coming and being admitted to the bar, but there's still, for me, kind of that still, I only know 2 Latin Americans,
Of course. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's still kind of, one of the first, and I hope to get there, because hopefully it sets precedents for newer generations, and to be able to say, like, to see someone like me or of the other 2 Latino barristers and be like, oh, I can be like them, because they're like me.
Of course. Yeah. And so once you become a fully qualified barrister, what sort of the end goal for you? Like, what would you then like to do once you're at that stage?
So I think, as a barrister, I would love to specialize in family law, as well as I do like some aspects of criminal law, and a lot of what I do is civil and some commercial. I generally love all these areas, and there are chambers that don't specialize in just one. They specialize in an array of different areas. But I definitely would love to use my platform to, of course, educate others, especially for me. I've always been passionate about helping the Latin American community. That for me is the most important thing, just because of how I grew up and how I see how my mum helps others. And it doesn't take being at the top of an organization or the top of a fancy title in order to make a change. So that for me, I think I definitely use my skills not only to represent those from more ethnic and marginalized minorities, but maybe create a platform where I'm able to do that a lot more and provide opportunities and help those that maybe want to look for a career in bar, do that through contacts that I'd meet at the bar, as well as potentially become an educator maybe later on in my career. I'd love to do that and give back in that sense. And and educate myself a bit more as to kind of the Latinx dysphoria that's happening in the UK.
Cool, yeah, definitely. How do you feel like obviously you've had your own experience through undergrad, through postgrad, and now at this stage that you're at the moment, like what sort of changes would you like to see once you're admitted to the bar, and obviously you're getting all this experience, but what sort of changes do you feel are needed, and would you like to see within the law community in particular?
Definitely more diversity would be the first thing, because again, like I said, if you are representing the general public, for me it's just mind-blowing that there isn't that representation. I actually remember once a bar school and we had a brief, and the brief basically said it was based on O.J. Simpson's case, but it was kind of like a spin-off. So we had like let's say no J Simpson, something silly. And one of the things that was in the brief was the word I'm not swearing, but the word, it's the Jamaican dialect, like bumperclark. Sorry if that's swearing on your podcast, but anyways, and I remember someone in the class who had literally said, "Did anyone get a chance to Google that? Because I didn't yesterday."
Wow.
And it's one of those moments where I was like, are you serious? I don't know, maybe my upbringing is a bit different, of course, but I don't know, there's just certain things I just thought, wow, it's quite detached from maybe popular culture or I don't know, different ethnic minorities or whatever. So I was like, oh, what? So definitely diversity at the bar, and also being able to provide the new generation of Latinxes with a voice more than anything else, and to be able to ask questions and to be curious and to be able to explore different pathways that potentially traditionally weren't available to them, and to kind of dismantle that idea that, because of your parents' first generation trauma, that you can do something more. As you know, our communities densely populated in hospitality. People say, Latin Americans are mostly cleaners, etc. So to be able to kind of break away these type of stereotypes and be like, well, no, I'm a lawyer, I want to be this, and it's not to defer or detach from what our parents maybe have done, but just to kind of be like, no, the horizon's a lot further along than what you think.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree with you. I agree with that. It's actually quite funny with what you were talking about, the differences in upbringing and how that can sort of filter down into, like, for example, that person who thought that she had to Google that term. Because one of my questions actually was like, how do you feel like your upbringing has shaped you into the person you are now and the professional you are now as well?
So I was really fortunate, I think, although I grew up in Finchley, where most of my peers, like I said, were, let's say, white British, or it was just a very white British area. I would go to Seven Sisters Market every weekend or every other weekend, because my mum at the time was a single mother. She couldn't afford childcare, and for her it was a lot better to just have me there while she was working. So I got to meet a lot of different Latinos through being in Seven Sisters and making friends and playing in Seven Sisters and like running around the corridors. And therefore what that meant was, although I had this education, I was also able to really connect with my Latin roots and never really felt that I missed out in that. So I always still was able to eat my food, was able to listen to my music, and culturally speaking.
Yeah.
And I think more so when I went to university, I went to an all-girls school, but again, that was very mixed. And that was an array of different ethnicities. And that for me was amazing because I got to see other people's cultures and immerse myself in that. And you know, the same differences that I had gone through, they had also gone through potentially. So yeah, I think also being from London really helped because I have a friend of mine, she's a trustee also for the Latin Village, and she's Chilean, but she grew up in somewhere just past Essex, Ipswich.
Right.
And her experience was completely different, where she was the only Latina and didn't really feel that she could express her heritage because of being different. Whereas for us, I feel at least in London, you want to be different. You don't want to just be British, even though you kind of are.
Yeah.
You want to be Colombian or Ecuadorian beforehand. If anyone asks you where you're from, you're like, oh, I'm so Colombian, you know, you're not anything else. So it's definitely different.
Okay, and so you're also quite involved with, or really involved with, the Latin Village, Save the Latin Village project. So maybe you could talk about that a bit more, just so our listeners get to know about it also, and maybe they can sort of help out or support.
Yeah, so I've been, like I said, because my mum's been a trader at the Latin Village for the past 10 years or so, no, over 10 years, I've kind of grew up there, and therefore in growing up there and kind of seeing all the traders as my family in a way, facing all these different issues, I really got involved and really interested and curious as to what was really happening. So I think at least as a teenager, there was curiosity in me to understand why is it that our rights weren't being looked at as fairly as this other person who wanted to bulldoze over Seven Sisters.
Right.
And then once you start looking at that and you look at communities that maybe have gone through similar things and talking to other people, organizations, creating allies in, you know, academically, politically, legally, other NGOs, like all these different types of people that have come together to kind of help. That was for me very important to kind of understand what struggles are we facing as Latin people in London specifically. What is it that, you know, housing is such an issue for us as well, and all these actual things that potentially we could change in the future. So I've, for example, I've been able to take part in roundtable discussions with one of the mayors of London for, I think, communities and diversity, I think their title was, and put forward proposals as to how we could better assist the Latin American community.
Right.
As well as being able to go to other universities abroad and speak about issues and allyship, and also, let's say, go to the UN and talk to them about how they can help. And then, of course, through our founder, she's been able to bring in support from the United Nations, which is kind of unheard of. And that was really good. So it's been really good to kind of find out what's happening in our community and genuinely understand it and break it down and see how we can help those around us.
Right. Okay. And what is the current situation with the Latin Village, or Save the Latin Village sort of project?
Yeah. So the Latin Village is the name of the organization, but officially the village is called Pueblito Paisa, or Seven Sisters Market. What the difficult that we have is, of course, you've got this fancy developer with, you know, unlimited funds potentially wanting to bulldoze over the market and make it into, let's say, another kind of shopping mall like a Westfield.
Right.
And what we're trying to say is, well, hold on, why don't we also have a community plan, which means that we can also rebuild this building because it's absolutely beautiful. But how about that we still keep it with the traders that are inside and not push us out? So it's all this about gentrification, and why is it that Tottenham more than anything is being so gentrified? And again, when you look at it, it's issues in terms of ethnic minorities and social cleansing, because, you know, these places aren't as affluent as other boroughs, and therefore the council look to make their borough more attractive to other people, etc.
I mean, something similar has happened. I'm not sure if that such a big scale in Elephant and Castle as well.
Yeah,
you sort of see the whole gentrification around there. The thing is, as well, it has like knock-on effects as well on the community, because obviously, if more investment goes in, if the just becomes a more attractive place to go to, rent is going to go up, and it's going to push out communities, people who just can't pay, you can't keep up paying rent that's been increased, or it definitely has effects on the communities.
Definitely. I think for me, the most important thing is that I kind of look at, let's say, what the Latin village has created. And if you go to the Latin village, you'll see that I think at least 70% of the traders are female ran businesses. And that's quite different, because you usually hear of men running businesses, especially within the Latin American community. So this is predominantly female, which is quite niche, is quite unique. But also a lot of the actual traders there have a business. So they are business owners, and some of them are first generation, second generations. So what comes with owning a business is, of course, knowing how, let's say, the government works around you, your position in society, being able to bring in revenue for your own family, which helps you build into different generations. Now, you take that away, for me, it's as if you're starting from zero. You're giving, again, people the hardship of potentially going and seeking out employment. And if you don't have a degree, and if you don't maybe speak the language, you're still looking at jobs that some would say are, basic entry levels or etc. And that for me is the real issue, the fact that if you're taking this away, you're really just like digressing our community back to maybe 20 years ago, or even 30 years ago. And that for me is an issue, because with owning something, there's a sense of pride and a sense of, I can do this. If I can own a business, my son can own a business. And even just that mindset really just helps people socially and economically move forward with their lives.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and if for example, some of our listeners want to get involved and sort of support the project, how can they get involved if possible?
Yeah, so if they're on Instagram, if they just search if you search on Instagram at Save Latin Village, it'll come up, or on Twitter it's Latin Village UK, and on Facebook it's the same, Latin Village. So any of those any of those social medias, more than happy to get in contact. And if anyone wants to get involved, we always have like loads of really cool events.
Okay, good. All right, Stefanie, so just before we finish, I've got a few last questions for you. So if you could sort of think back to the Stefanie of maybe second year at university, what advice would you give her? Gosh,
do your research. Before you look at maybe applying for other things, do your research. You live in London, therefore, please believe there is money there around. And therefore, do your research before embarking on something that's quite expensive as a bar course, I would definitely say. Also, just definitely keep going and believe in yourself. I would say, because I think and especially in a career such as law, which takes a few years, it's difficult to have a hindsight into what's to come, as well as use your platform a lot more, reach out to as many people, don't be shy, and you will never know unless you ask. If it's a no, at least you know. So okay, that's probably what I would say.
Great. And on a similar note, what advice would you give to upcoming Latinos, Latinx who are, with respect to their careers, sort of personal growth? What sort of advice would you give them?
Definitely say have set yourself short-term and long-term goals, not only because it helps you track your progress, but it really, to celebrate the small wins and to really think about what you want to do. And even if it isn't what your parents want you to do it anyways, because it will benefit you in the long run. And if you really want to do it, please believe that you will get there. But remember to ask for help. Well, remember that there's nothing wrong with asking for help along the way.
Yeah.
And therefore, again, do your research and see what's available, who can you speak to, because you'll find that in any career, you will need your allies, and that's helpful.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Stefanie. Finally, if someone, for example, would want to know more about law and has some particular sort of questions, how can they maybe reach out to you and get in contact with you?
So I am on social media. I think anywhere that you search for me, so Stefanie.Alvarez, Alvarez with a Z at the end, Steffi with an F. And that I am there. I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone wants to get in contact with you there. Diego, you've got my contact details as well. Yeah. So happy for anyone to email me or whatever means is available. And I'm happy to give my number to anyone through social media or anything like that if you want to go for a chat and maybe have a coffee in the near future. Happy to take the time to help anyone along their way.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Stefanie. Thank you for taking the time out to join us, to talk to us about your career. The whole journey. It's definitely it seems to have been a long one, but I congratulate you for the perseverance and that resilience to continue. And I'm sure that a lot of value, you'll reap a lot of value personally, but also for the community as well from your effort. So thank you, Stefanie, for joining. And it would be good to have you at some point in the future again, maybe talking about something else as well, anything that's of your interest. So thank you, Stefanie.
Great. Thank you, Diego, for having me.
All right.